morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Shauna Heller, and I'm the founder of Clay Park VR. It's a VR strategy and advisory service that works with corporations, brands, institutions to bring VR and AR into enterprise, education, and healthcare settings. I'll be your moderator today, and we're here to talk about doctors and developers, combining expertise to improve medical training with VR. What's really exciting about this project is that it really began back in January of 2016 when Children's Hospital Los Angeles reached out to Oculus and Facebook because there were two doctors that said, we have a problem at our hospital and we think that VR might be a solution for it. And Oculus, needing a bit of a pathway to be able to help and support them, reached out to me as a former Oculus employee to help put in motion what you're going to be hearing about for the next 30 minutes. Children's Hospital Los Angeles is based just, 3 miles from here? 2 miles? 4 subway stops. And as the name connotes, they specialize in treating pediatric patients. Sometimes those pediatric patients are in crisis when they come into an emergency room and are either suffering in ways that are very high stakes but happen infrequently. And the question is, how do we train for these procedures when there are so many obstacles against it? And there's been traditional training using mannequins and simulation in the hospital medical settings for many years. But it's very expensive, it's difficult to maintain psychological fidelity, and there are preparation costs. Hospitals routinely spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to create these kinds of training. So here's our problem. How do we solve that using VR? How do we go from simulations that look like this into the next generation of medical simulation and training? Virtual reality transcends many of the weaknesses and gaps in mannequin-based training because it offers access to and remote training to medical students and to residents. And it allows for asynchronicity, whereas in a real trauma scenario, training simulation, you have to gather everyone together and work in real time. And also a benefit of virtual reality for this type of training is that you arrive at a standardization and distribution model. So we work together as a team of experts to create 2 unique virtual training simulations for Children's Hospital Los Angeles. It was a project sponsored by Oculus and Facebook under their VR for Good campaign, and we were thrilled to have their support all along the way. The 2 doctors that were the principal investigators for this project are Dr. Josh Sherman and Todd Chang, who is with us here today. And then from the front-end development of the actual content is Rick Shorten of BioFlight VR. BioFlight VR is a VR medtech startup that is into its 2nd year. Rick's background as the visual effects supervisor on Crime Scene Investigator, a show that ran on CBS for many years, gave him a unique set of skills that helped him be able to hit the ground running with the doctors for this project. And then we have AI Solve. Tom Dolby at the end is the head of simulations for AI Solve. AI Solve is a London-based immersive and interactive software company that specializes in using artificial intelligence to create intelligent and responsive virtual training programs and other simulations. So we brought everyone together, and in this talk we're going to basically go through the process of what it took to have the doctors become game designers and what it took for Oculus and Facebook to support it and how it was working for BioFlight to collaborate and integrate with Tom's AI Solve platform that they had built on top of Unity. And that is essentially where we're going to lead off. Todd, do you want to start off with, with talking about what it was about the Rift and the virtual reality technology that made you feel that this would be a valid piece of hardware to help you breach some of the to bridge some of the gaps in your training at the hospital already?
Sure. So as you mentioned, we have a lot of medical training, healthcare training that happens in a variety of hospitals, including Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And we've traditionally learned everything using experiential learning. Essentially, you learn to swim by being thrown into the pool, and maybe there's a lifeguard just watching you. And so because of experiential learning, for common things like how to talk to patients in a calm office setting are pretty easy to teach. So you've seen the medical students perhaps if you've ever been to hospitals. But the harder thing to teach in experiential learning is what you've termed as high stakes, low frequency events. And there's a variety of high stakes, low frequency events depending on the subspecialty that we work in. And as in pediatric emergency medicine, we have pediatric resuscitations. That's our high stakes, low frequency events. And so we wanted to find a way to actually train people on high stakes, low frequency events. And mannequin-based simulation is really tough. It has a lot of people. Scheduling is a big problem just logistically and getting everything together. So VR seemed like a logical next step that offered a lot of different advantages.
Great, thank you. So Parisa, as you know, there are VR startups and corporations and organizations every day out there pitching the platforms on different VR concepts that they think would be great for the platform to get behind and throw support behind and whatnot. What was it about this project that was special, that caught everyone's attention and became something that Facebook and Oculus could champion?
Well, like you said, it was sort of perfect timing because we were at a place and we had been talking about opportunities programmatically in terms of, like, we truly believe at Oculus and Facebook that VR can have a huge social impact in terms of things like building empathy, raising awareness for important issues, but also the way that it can transform fields like education and journalism and in particular health. And health was an area where we had been hearing from experts a lot about the transformative effects of VR in terms of education and training. So when this project came along, it was sort of perfect, and we were drawn really, first of all, to the partners and to the level of expertise, and having this team work collaboratively together, and then having people that were so passionate about the same mission and what VR could do for this. So we really have been thrilled by the results.
Great, always awesome to hear. So Rick, from your perspective, from Hollywood to virtual reality, what was it about VR that made you want to switch directions from, a focus on high-end visuals in that way to finding a path into virtual reality?
Well, I mean, for our team, we spent a long time entertaining people, and I think we, through developing our pipeline and figuring out ways to make typically dry subjects engaging and visually immersive, it seemed like when we were exposed to this technology, there was a reason for us to start to stay in the same, use that knowledge that we'd gained on the show and turn it into something purposeful. So not that entertainment's not purposeful, but this felt like an area where we could have real social impact, and that was important for the group and important for our founders. So that sort of launched us into it.
Cool, thanks. Tom, so there was something kind of special about the way AI Solve had evolved as a company that put you guys in a unique position to work on this project. Can you talk about how you were especially prepared to manage the programming and coding of the CHLA modules?
Yeah, so AI Solve has been developing training simulations for many years now. I joined AI Solve back in 2010, and since then I've had the pleasure of developing training simulations for a wide variety of subjects, from plumbing, electronic engineering, cataract surgery. And over these years, we have really refined a methodology of working with subject experts to gather their knowledge and transform it into a virtual a software package that enables us to train new students. And we strongly believe that a non-linear approach to learning is a very valuable way to do this, to encourage critical thinking skills, because when students actually go out there into the real world, there's not anyone there holding their hand. So yeah, we've for many years now we've been refining this process. We've even in the past dabbled with VR back in like 2010. It wasn't quite ready around that stage, so this was a great project. Now that VR is really kind of reaching to be a contemporary solution these days.
Mm-hmm. Timing is everything, totally. So this is kind of where it gets kind of fun, talking with Todd and Rick about what it was like to to take real training, real training scenarios, but also real trauma scenarios, and turn those into a gamified platform. So you have to start at the very beginning, and you and Rick work together. What did you create?
It was awesome. But one of the things that we wanted to focus in the VR methodology was to, because it's experiential learning, and we are dealing with learners who are otherwise of intelligence, I guess is a nice way of saying it, but really it's somebody not at the beginner level, but perhaps in the advanced beginner or even higher level. We wanted to make sure everything looked perfect, felt perfect, and even sounded perfect. So there was a lot of time spent on establishing what's called the physical fidelity, and that's the textures, that's the coloring, that's the movements that the kids are supposed to make. We spent a fair amount of time trying to get this, a seizure looking just right, so that the physician who is trained to spot a fake seizure versus a real seizure is going to be fooled that it's a real seizure. And so all these small details are where the subject matter experts and the capabilities of VR design is where it came in. So we spent a lot of time making that fidelity just right, and I think it shows for the most part.
For you, Rick, you'd worked with doctors before, so how did you apply that to this process? And then were there any surprises about how interacting with Todd and Josh in this, or Todd and Josh, working with them to pull out the best beats in the story of that trauma room scenario?
Yeah, I think our approach is usually, I've done a lot of listening over the last 10 years, a lot of absorbing of medical knowledge. That's not my background. So we just started by listening and observing, and we went in and we spent a couple days at the hospital and we watched them do the mannequin-based training. We saw how they interacted, and so I guess our job was to audit what they already do and try to translate that, successfully into a virtual environment to create that sort of perfect representation. And so that was how we looked at our role in this project, was to sort of synthesize that, and then create the environment and the assets and get the tone right. We had a lot of discussions about tone, and it's a serious game, but we take it very seriously. This is training that doctors are going to use to make them better doctors. So it felt like this was something that I think we're used to working with serious subject matter like this. And then, we just spent time absorbing what they do in the hospital, and you can see that by, some of the photos. We just went in there, and they were just amazing they just gave us so much access, which was hugely important.
Super important.
They could have just said, go find models off the internet and good luck, and they didn't do that. And they gave us time in these trauma rooms, and we photoed everything out and surveyed the entire room, and I think that was hugely helpful for the success of the project.
We've had a lot of people go through the module that they go in the module first, and then we have taken them into the trauma room, and they just walk around and they're like, I've been here. Like, this is exactly what it was like. And I think reaching that sort of authenticity is definitely important. So Tom, coming back to you, kind of along that same vein, what was the process like? What did it look like working with Todd to pull out the gaming beats, right? The serious games, gaming beats, to make sure that the med students and the residents were being guided through the process in the right way?
So this really comes back to the methodology I talked about earlier. So when I say non-linear learning, as Rick highlighted, we have to do a lot of learning ourselves. I had to study what the protocol was for these modules that we were covering, and non-linear learning is not the easy way to go about this. It would be much easier to just have a kind of a straightforward step-by-step guide, but we decided that's not going to be an effective training solution. So the way the non-linear process works is that we had to sit with Todd and Josh and really break this module down into like the smallest pieces we could. This came down to like what people are in the room, why are they there, what are their responsibilities, what medications are available in the room, how do these affect the patient, does it increase the blood pressure, the heart rate, how does it affect it? And we really had to kind of refine all these little pieces and gain an understanding of what they did, so that we could give the users in the simulation the ability to choose their own path through the simulation. It wasn't, a hand-holding exercise. I think it's a very powerful moment at the beginning of the simulation where you are thrust into the room, the EMT briefs you, and then everyone in the room turns and looks at you and says, "Doctor, what do you want to do?" And it's then up to you to read the vital signs of the patient to understand if you're making the correct decisions. And so we broke everything down to give these options, and we put together what we called logic flow diagrams, and we worked with the doctors to ensure that we had a valid approach, an accurate and effective approach. And we made sure to keep them involved as much as they could, really. Like, we were doing kind of new builds of the software every week, distributing, getting feedback. And I think the methodology was proven once again that I think we've produced something we can really be proud of.
Absolutely. It's super responsive, and when, again, people go through the scenario and your residents working on it, when you put that headset on, you're immediately immersed in that trauma room, and there's noise, there's distraction levels, there's a lot that has been built into this module, and we'll touch on it as we go through the other questions. But it creates an agency and an urgency to move through that module, and it's incredibly powerful. And so, Parisa, from a platform perspective, what did you hope would be accomplished by supporting this project?
Well, going back to what I said, really sort of the use case for how VR can transform medical training and education, which I feel like it has. But our goal with it is really to then scale it bigger, to take these two modules and take it to abroad, to Europe and other places, make sure other institutions have access to it, but really for it to serve as a model for the possibilities of what can be done in this space, which it definitely will. And so we'll be talking about it far and wide, and really using it as that model of how you can get this kind of team together, the subject matter experts, the developers, and create things like this, not only in terms of health, but in education and other areas as well. So we have big plans for it.
That's great. Super cool. Tom, since we're addressing a lot of developers here and we're at the Unity Developer Conference, can you touch a little bit on what it was like to use the Unity platform for the development of this? And I think it's always beneficial to hear, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that, the platform itself can grow. But what were some of the great things about Unity? And Rick may want to weigh in a little bit on this as well, about what it was like to work with the Unity platform.
So we've been using Unity as kind of our main software development platform for many years, like since the days of Unity 2, so quite a few years ago now. And we haven't really looked back. It's been a really great tool for us because we've been able to build upon it, kind of reusable modules, because the modules we've built upon Unity we call them like a sort of intelligent interactive software driven by artificial intelligence. And so we've developed those modules, and with this project in particular, we really pushed what Unity was capable of, like particularly with the animation system. We had some incredibly tough challenges of there's a 7-year-old girl who's having a critical allergic reaction, and she has to display so many different sort of symptoms at the same time, whether it's like scratching or different types of breathing and all the different layers of movement that have to kind of dynamically blend together. And Unity's animation system really, really helped with that. They have like a good sort of animation event system, which helped us kind of ensure that things were happening as they were supposed to. Like a medication shouldn't have an effect until the nurse has actually injected it into the bloodstream. And processes like that really kind of helped us make the most of it.
Great. And Rick, from the entertainment perspective of it, Unity was a new engine for you guys. It's something that a lot of people in the entertainment industry don't necessarily, it's not a go-to resource. How was that experience?
Well, we leaned on Tom a lot. From the beginning, we just started sending stuff his way, and then took their lead. They threw stuff into the environment, and they sent us back engineering builds for us to use and to take a look at. But what we tried to work hard on, and our founder, Randy, who's here, did a really great job of thinking about the user experience and designing the UI. And just sort of, that was one area where I felt like we finally connected in Unity, because besides that, it was like turning stuff over and letting them make it great. But at that point, we really got to sort of, after we'd been working with it for a while, and 2 or 3 months into the builds, I think we were finally able to sort of connect and say, here's some ideas. Like the tutorial was a really great example of teamwork, and I think it's a great way to start it. It's this amazing little way to get people into the experience. So when they begin, they're comfortable. But that was a real collaborative thing in Unity for us. So yeah, it was
Great.
Yeah.
And Todd, you have a bit of a gaming background. Like there was something kind of special and unique about your work and your background that really lent itself to this particular project. Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Sure. So I do other work in serious games and gamification within technology and education among healthcare providers. My current video game is Nier Automata, if anyone's playing it right now.
Little shout out.
Woo! So the paradigm of using video games to teach is weird, because most video games you do not want to do the actions in the video games in real life. Grand Theft Auto, maybe, don't do that in real life. So to actually have capturing the actions and the thought patterns and the cognitive frameworks that we develop from VR and video games onto the real world is actually a whole new step. So a very specific example is pattern recognition. So for most of you who play video games, in order to beat the boss, you have to memorize the movement sets that they do and anticipate and react appropriately, but nobody tells you what they are. You have to discover it on your own. And so that discovery and pattern recognition is never explained, but it's an inherent part of video games and VR. And that's what we want to also empower our healthcare providers to do, is inherently develop that pattern recognition that's required in these high-stakes, low-frequency events. But we don't have to tell them to do that. They will naturally do it if the VR is programmed in such a way that it introduces it step by step.
Cool, thank you. So we're coming down the last couple of minutes, and it's always my favorite part of a panel is to just have a kind of a free flow on the biggest surprises that came out of this project, or the biggest things that you'd like to do for the next one, and things that help developers as they're considering partnering with subject matter experts and things like that. What are some of the things to keep in mind? Maybe Rick, would you like to start with some thoughts?
Yeah, for us, it's everything. Even though we had decades of experience, this was a new workflow for us, and so for artists and directors coming out of entertainment, it's not always a one-to-one, and so but it was a master class for us, just as far as using new tools, and then also this sort of global collaboration. Like getting emails from them at 3 in the morning, and then I'd get up and then I'd respond to them, and so it was from a lot of that, it was just an opportunity to sort of for us to expand our knowledge.
Yeah, I think something that was really interesting was that we did live motion capture on real doctors, real nurses who provided this, that there's a real sense of authenticity to it all. And to me, that was the most surprising thing. I'm like, okay, well, we need to make sure that we have the right actors and things like that. And like, oh, nope. And the nurses and the respiratory therapists, like, they were amazing. Like, they nailed their script, right? Like, they rolled into mocap, and we put them in the black suits with the white dots, and we got them in there, and they nailed it every time, and that was really, like, kind of spectacular. What about you?
I think that was that. I mean, you're talking about authenticity, just to add to that, and that was huge, to get them to perform the actual, the intubation, and that gave a foundation where you already knew it was real, and then anything that we did on top of that, secondaries for animation, was just to enhance. But it was a great base, and so we got so much out of that it's not that I wasn't hopeful that we would, but I was really pleased with how effective that one day of motion capture was.
How about you, Todd?
Well, if we go back to the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes, please.
The good for me was that we didn't really have to compromise on what we were aiming to replicate. We were approaching some pretty complex subject matter, but I have a lot of praise for Todd and Josh at CHLA for how dedicated they were to work closely with us and find a way to replicate all of these problems. The bad was probably about just understanding how much intense animation work there was. I mean, it was one of the most sort of complex technical challenges we had of trying to get that all to work. I'm glad we did, but it was a shock. And I think the ugly was probably having to watch the virtual baby projectile vomit over the operating room so many times.
How about for you, Todd?
So what's interesting is that as advice, I suppose, because I think am I the only healthcare provider here? Woo, yes, yeah. Is basically pick a subject matter expert that cares. For two reasons. One is that not all experts can actually translate or explain their expertise. Just because they can do it doesn't mean that they can turn it into and help you with the code. And Josh Sherman and I actually sat down together and said, we refuse to be that subject matter expert who dumps a bunch of ideas, runs off to some island for 10 months, and then complain about your work because we didn't answer any of your emails.
You were very involved. That was great.
Yeah, hopefully it wasn't too over-involved.
Yeah, just kidding.
But yeah, you want a subject matter expert who will be there with all the small little questions so that you can get help with the nuances that to other folks that may seem okay, but to a physician or a nurse who's done this before, that small bit of detail can actually lose them in that virtual reality. So it's really important to work with those people.
Great, thank you. Prisa, any parting thoughts?
I mean, again, it's been an amazing experience. It's so new that you don't know what to expect, but really it's driven by the expertise, but also the passion of this group.
Yep. Keep it burning. Keep it burning. So thank you all for coming out today. It was a really exciting project to be involved in, and I just want to thank everyone here because it really has been a tremendous experience and probably the beginning of an incredible future for virtual reality and medical training that's cost-effective, scalable, distributable. You can use it in third world countries to replace a lot of the outmoded processes that now exist. So thank you all for coming out today.